Well, this is a very important piece of information concerning Chapter 3. In Chapter 3, you learn to see the nouns you have already learned in their singular and plural forms. We'll teach you to see them as each noun, each form, consisting of a base plus an ending. And sometimes, as you can see, there will be changes. This chapter is crucial for a variety of reasons, so take some notes, pay attention, make sure you get this. First, I want to start off with a bit of a disclaimer. You'll notice here a star perhaps like one that you encountered in a children's book when you were a child, when someone taught you "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star," and for a long time perhaps that is what you thought of as a star. A star is this shape. Now, as time went by, especially if you took a course in astrophysics, you discovered that stars don't really look like this. Nonetheless, this simple little schematic served as a very useful tool in the beginning to help you see something important. And that's what we want to do, what I want to do today. I want to tell you a story, which is a schematic and certainly a distortion of reality, in much the same way that that star is a distortion of what a star looks like. Having said that, let me tell you this story. And the story is, English consists of, imagine English as consisting of being a language fused from three previous languages. Imagine that there were three tribes, and each of those tribes had their own language at one time, and then they all came together, and produced a language, brought their own words to it. In one tribe, there were words like battle, head, door, and injustice. In another tribe, there were words like man, woman, ox, child. And in tribe 3, there were words like cactus, octopus, alumnus, radius. Now perhaps, if you think about it, you'll realize that nouns are it is not enough for a noun simply to convey a semantic notion, a core semantic notion like head. It does communicate that. A head, when one says head, you get some image of a head in your mind. But think about how our nouns work. Turns out, for example, that we need to be able to add a meaning of plurality to that noun, so that a word ceases to be just the semantic meaning and becomes instead a fusion of semantic meanings that means something like head, and then the S ending on it that means, and by the way, more than one of them. You'll notice that in our little story about three different tribes forming English, that each tribe had a different way of making its nouns. Battle, battles, head, heads, door, doors, injustice, injustices. I think you can see how there are lots of other nouns that tribe must have invented, and you'd know how to make the plurals of. Tribe 2 had words like man, men, not man, mans, and woman, woman, not woman, womans, and ox, oxen, not oxes, and child, children, not childs. And tribe 3 had cactus, cacti, octopus, octopi, alumnus, alumni, radius, radii. If we tried to understand the patterns involved here, we might do it in this way. We might say, if you think about it, what cactus and cacti show us is that there's a kind of ending that you can put on a word that says that thing that grows in the desert, and also just one of them. And it appears to be the case that the US ending says just one of them, whereas the I ending says, oh, and by the way, more than one. Bringing that same logic to bear, saying nouns indicate not only the core semantic notion, such as ox, which is this thing with four legs, right? Not just the core notion, but also either plural, oxen, or singular, just one ox, ox with nothing added. Consequently, we can say of tribe 1 that the way they made their singulars was to add nothing, that's that null marker, to add nothing to the word, and to make a plural, they added an S to it. In other words, core notion, base, battle, plus nothing, which means, and just one of them, core notion, base, battle, and S, which means more than one of them. Whereas in tribe 2, once again they used the nothing for us to indicate just one of them, but they used ENs to indicate plurals, oxen, children. Now we can look at these and see that there are some anomalies, such as that R in children. Why isn't it just children or childen or something? Well, we'd have to explain that. Maybe there's a good explanation, maybe not. And we look at words like men and women, and we say, wow, that almost looks like they should be mannen and womanen or something like that, but they aren't. I wonder why not. Well, we'd have to explain that change, but it seems likely that for some reason or another, a syllable was dropped out of the base in the plurals. Okay, so that's how singulars and plurals work with tribe 1, tribe 2, tribe 3 in this schematic. In some languages, as you know, things get even a little more complicated because there is grammatical gender. In the case of brothers and sisters, there are siblings of both genders, and consequently, hermano masculine, hermanos masculine plural, but hermana, sister, feminine, and hermanas, feminine plural. The same pattern obtains for friend, amigo and amigos, but girlfriends, amiga, amigas, and cousins, primo, prima, primos, girl cousins, prima, primas, so that the A and the O change to indicate gender. And you notice that change involves even words that have no sex about them. There's nothing more male about tacos than about cervezas, beers, and yet taco happens to take the ending that male-type words take, masculine words take, and cerveza takes the endings that female, feminine words take. So, let's just keep that gender issue in mind. Now, let's turn to the words that you have already learned. You've learned the singulars and the plurals of what you are now learning to call the nominative case, which means they can be subjects. If you encounter one of the words you have already learned, the singulars or the plurals, in a sentence, it will be, let us say for point of simplification, the subject of the sentence. Now, so what I want to do right now is look at the endings here. And I'd encourage you to copy down this little chart because you may need it later on to follow along what's going to be said. But think about the words that you've already learned. You'll notice that this is divided into masculines, feminines, and neuters, both singular and plural, and it's divided into what we called in the first place Group 1, Group 2, and Group 3, and which now we're going to call, in the more appropriate grammatical terms, first declension, second declension, and third declension. You'll learn now, as you learn about bases, that every noun in Group 1, which is to say first declension, which is just another word, a grammatical word for group, every noun in that has a base that ends in alpha, and that the final ending of the base, ending in alpha, is what makes it first declension. Second declension nouns all have, by definition, a final sound, omicron, in their base. And the third declension is everything that isn't a first declension or a second declension, that is, every base that doesn't end in alpha or omicron. First declension words, you'll recall, are words like amaxa, and second declension are words like theos and anthropos, and third declension words are words like kulix and xyphos. Okay, now notice some interesting things. Every masculine singular form, no matter its declension, adds an S to indicate singularity. If you want to say just one nauptes, sailor, or anthropos, human, or basileus, king, they all end in they all have a sigma added to them. It's also the case that feminines normally take a sigma ending for the singular. The only exception to this is in the first declension, those whose bases end in alpha, where nothing is added, hence words like amaxa. The plurals, non-neuter plurals of third declension nouns, end in epsilon sigma. Kulikes, hi kulikes, and hoi basileies. All the masculine and feminines of the third declension end in epsilon sigma. All the first and second declensions of both genders in the plural end in iota. So, machai and nauftai, and machai and nauftai, and hodoi and theoi. Notice that there are no neuters at all in the first declension, ever, and so you don't have to worry about those. In the second declension, doron, you learnt to add a nu to the omicron base, or you learnt forms that do have a nu added to the omicron base, and as you will learn words like pure in third declension, those are the base plus nothing. Nothing is added to third declension neuter singulars. All neuter plurals, and there are only neuter plurals in the second and third declensions, remember, none in the first. All neuter plurals that can be subjects, that is, that are nominatives, add the ending alpha. Again, this is a useful chart. I'd encourage you to copy it down, pause this thing, copy it down, and then move on. Let's take a quick look at what these tell us. We said that in the singulars of feminine nouns, that bases that end in alpha, they add nothing. Hence, amaxa, trapes, amusa. But that in the first declension, they add iotas to make their plurals. Trapezai, amaxai, musai. And we said that all masculine nouns, no matter what declension, add sigmas. Anthropos, theos, doulos, nekius. In the second declension, we also said that the second declension bases all end in omicron, just as first declension bases all end in both in the singular and plural in alpha. And we said that to make a plural in the second declension, just as in the first, you add an iota, so that you end up with characteristic alpha iota at the end, which is final letter of the base plus plural marker, and here omicron, final letter of the base plus iota. And then we said in the third declension, non-neuters add sigmas to the base, the very same base to which they add epsilon sigma to make the plural. So basis and basies, nekius and nekius. These words illustrate the simplest application of these rules in which there is no complication.